Wedding speeches, the dreaded moment, sometimes very entertaining, occasionally very profound, mostly just a relief when they're over. But there's one that stands out in my mind from 30-something years ago. The groom stood up and he said, "Church people, I need your attention." Got it straight away. "Don't forget," he said, "that neither my new wife nor I grew up in functional families. But we were blessed to find our way as children into churches. And there we found family. We found role models, people to look up to and to want to be like. And we found people we didn't want to be like too, but that's what you should find in a family. Different generations living out their lives, but sharing a set of values. In this family, we do this, or in this family, that's not okay, or in this family, this is always important. He said, these are the things we got from our churches because we didn't get them at home. But now we want to establish a home together and hopefully a family where good values, good attitudes, and the nurture of life can take place. And we continue to need you to inspire us and to show us the way. Because all we know is what we don't want it to be like, except for what we've seen in you folk. So don't disappoint us. It was quite a burden to drop on the rest of us. And I remember feeling that sense of responsibility that he intended to communicate. Because family is the natural and most obvious place for life to be nurtured and to grow, for attitudes to be shaped, for values to be developed, and for a whole approach to lifestyle and to living to take on its nature, and for people to find out who they are and become confident. Well, there are two standout images in Scripture for the church, and they're important because they'll stop us believing the impression that much of the world has that church is some kind of religious organisation. But that's not at all what Jesus began. He began a community, and it can be compared, and is in the scriptures very powerfully, to two very organic things. One is the human body. And Paul tells the Corinthian church, think of yourselves as belonging in the same way that a foot or a hand, an eye or an ear must belong to the human body of which it's a part. It's an intrinsic belonging. It can't be separate. Even if it pretends it's separate, it's not. It depends upon the rest of the body for its function, and the rest of the body depends upon it functioning. Belong together and function together in that deeply profound way is Paul's message. It's a very, very powerful one. There's another one that comes up, and it comes up in a whole heap of places, which is the family, the picture of the family in the church as a family. This is a really important one. Let's begin with Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 11, a little snippet there. Both the person who makes others holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says, and here comes quotes from the Old Testament, I will declare your name to my brothers, and in the presence of the congregation I will sing your praises. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again he says, here am I, and the children God has given me. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Well, may seem a bit obscure at first reading, but let me encourage you not to give up on it. The message is clear enough, I think, in broad sweep, that God sees us as family and therefore sent his Son to us as a human being among human beings to save us through his human life and his human death. And the message that the writer to the Hebrews is saying, Jesus and those who Jesus redeems, saves, gives new life to, those who follow Jesus, those who take up the cause with Jesus, those who come to Jesus with their burdens, those who are drawn to Jesus, they're the same family. They form a family together. Well, I don't know if the writer to the Hebrews was thinking of this incident, but there's an incident which Matthew, Mark, and Luke all mention, and I'm going to read it to you out of Matthew's version of it. It's a time when Jesus was busy teaching, and the crowds were gathering to him. On this occasion, the crowd can't have been huge. It was sufficient because he's clearly in a house or something similar, and the crowd has jammed it full, and his family, his blood family, arrive. Anyway, here it is, verse 46 of Matthew chapter 12. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." And Jesus replied to him, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Well, that's a really strange instant, isn't it, on the face of things? But I think we can fairly readily see what he's getting at. Whoever does the will of God. He points round the room. He points to his disciples, those who are following him. Don't think of the 12. He's pointing into the crowd to all those who've decided to follow, to take an interest, to listen to his preaching, and with a view to putting it into practice. He's not pointing to perfect people. He's pointing to beginners. And he says, "Who's my mother? Here's my mother. Who's my brothers? Here are my brothers. Who are my sisters? Here are my sisters. You guys, you, because you've become like me, concerned to do the will of God upon the earth." Now, do you get discouraged at all by the constant wave of negative news and the very discouraging things going on in the world? And that feeling sometimes, it doesn't seem to matter what I do, I'm too small to make a difference. Is one problem after another besetting the people of planet Earth. And I can't change it. We can't change it. We're not big enough. Well, let me remind us of something. Our motive for doing God's will in the world, for seeking the way of love and for practicing it, is not that we'll have a big impact. We may have, or we may have a small impact, but trying to be significant by the size of our impact on the human population of planet Earth, that's not our motive. Our motive is a family value. It comes from being family with Jesus. See, Jesus wasn't rejecting his family, his mum and his brothers who had come to look for him. The sisters may well also have been there. He mentions them, but he's including us. Yeah, the authority to speak with Jesus would have sat with particularly his brothers. But we haven't time to pursue that bit. Jesus isn't rejecting family. He's using this moment, this occasion, which may have been a bit embarrassing anyway, to communicate a vital lesson to all who would want to learn from Jesus and follow him. God already feels a personal belonging, a desire that we be God's children. And that includes a desire that we take up the family values and the family cause of God. So when Jesus looks around, says, well, you guys are my mother, you guys are my brothers, you guys are my sister, then what he's doing is he's saying, the bond I have with those others, which we've had through birth and through sharing a life together, through running the family business together since we were children, through growing up in every situation together, well, that bond is to be replicated, is a sign to you that we're to have a bond like that as well. We'll call it church. In this, I hear both an affirmation and a call, just as I did at my friend's wedding all those years ago. I feel affirmed because Jesus is saying to me, it's not about how good you are. This is about, are you throwing your lot in with me? Are you following? Are we going together? Are you in? And I'm going, well, yeah, I'm in. I'm just not very good at being in. No. If you're in, you're family. And I find that amazingly affirming that God, that Jesus treats me with that kind of belonging, makes me feel affirmed in myself. It's a good feeling. And there's a call in it as well. You see, think about this. Jesus did all his learning virtually, or most of it, at home and in town. He never went to school. Don't forget that. So Jesus also never had a first day as a carpenter. He didn't serve an apprenticeship. He didn't leave school and go to work for Dad. He worked for Dad since he could walk, pretty much. The family did carpentry. So you could think of how in many farming families, people growing up on the farm just do it. It's part of everyday life. Everybody has a role. Everybody gets a job to do. It's a family farm and everybody grows up doing it together. Even more so when your family is your whole day virtually, the family farm or the family business. So, for example, Jesus's friends, Simon and Andrew and James and John, well, they grew up fishing. They just had always done it. They didn't go to school. They didn't learn to go fishing. They always went fishing from before they can remember. And so it's deep in them because their families weren't just people who met together after school and after work. They were deeply interlocked, organically united in the cause of looking after one another and getting through life. And they had a family business to see to, as well as a bond of love and loving relationships. And so I don't just find it affirming, I hear a call to get on with the family business. And our family business with Jesus and God in the church doesn't show its profit line in money or in new churches or in new members. It shows its profit line in faithfulness to the ways of God. Listen again to what Jesus said. Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. It's about the doing stuff. We have a family business to attend to, which is working together as Jesus' family to put the love of God to work in the world and to make effective the saving work of Christ and to communicate the amazing grace of God our Father. I'm very struck by Jesus including the term mother in that. You see, it would have worked really well if he'd looked round at his disciples, so you and me are there in effect through the others, and said, you are whoever does the will of God, you guys, not meaning you're perfect in doing the will of God, but meaning you've taken up that you're trying to follow. We've made a start together. You're forming the family. We've begun. Say, if he just said, so you guys are my brothers and sisters, well, that would have worked fine for me, and I don't think any of us would have felt something was missing. But he included his mother in that. And that to me is very striking because it goes to a very deep relationship to draw the parallel with. I'm moved to think of words of Jesus spoken during the pain and agony of his death, as shared with us in John's Gospel, there in chapter 19. Verse 25 says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved, standing nearby, he said to his mother, dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. You see, in their culture, the widowed mother was the responsibility of the older son. And what Jesus is doing in that scene is he is transferring his duty to his mother across to his friend. And he is saying to his mother, I'm dying, Mum, but I'm not going to leave you unsupported and uncared for. My friend is going to look after you. And he's saying to his friend, there's my mum. I can't do for her what an older son normally would do. You do it for me. And it's an immensely moving thing to me, this creating of this relationship. And it shows that deep caring. And it shows to me a greater intensity, therefore, of what Jesus is saying when he looks at you and me and the rest of the church and tells us, you guys are my mother. I love you guys. I depend upon you guys and you guys depend upon me. And there's a care that's to be given. There's a nurturing of Christ in each other that you need to be doing. You need to wake up to that. And there's a responsibility as well as a great privilege to be taken on. It's a great commitment and a beautiful picture. And I would leave with you this thought for today, that Jesus is looking at us and saying, if you are making any attempt at all to follow me, to belong to my people, to form this community that I'm creating, to trust me, to follow me, and therefore to be drawn with me into the family business of doing the Father's will on earth as it is in heaven, then know this. You are mother, sister, and brother to me. God bless you.